Good morning and welcome to another lecture in the Dawn of the Data Age series. This is the second half of a two-part sprint that we have done specifically for product managers. Last time it was about data-driven product vision. That video is now up on our YouTube page and the slides are on SlideShare, but as with this lecture, if you want the high-def, high-res slides, just send me an email and I will forward them on to you. If there are any questions as we go throughout this, please just jump in. You can unmute yourself. You can throw them up in the chat window. We have someone monitoring that. We like to get the questions as we go along rather than just wait till the end. I try to keep these things under an hour. Sometimes they go a little later. I suspect today might be that a little bit longer since we have quite a bit of material to cover. For those who are joining us for the first time, I'm Luciano. I'm the founder and CEO of Emperitas. We're a team of economists and data scientists who deliver bi-weekly customer lifetime value insights for our clients. I'm also the founder and director of the Utah Community Research Group at the University of Utah, where I teach microeconomics, data science, applied research, and American economic history. The lecture today, like all of the Dawn of the Data Age lectures, will follow three parts. The first is going to talk about the Agile customer research design overall. Then I'm going to dig deep into qualitative and quantitative research best practices. And I want to point out now, and I'll say this probably a few more times throughout this lecture, if you're looking for really detailed information about qualitative interviews or quantitative research, there are separate lectures that are exclusively dedicated to that. This is about teaching the overall process today for product managers to start an Agile research component to what they're doing to get customer feedback. So this is an ongoing process that would happen every month, and it's the details of that require that I take a broader view than if you're looking for specifically how to conduct IDIs, customer interviews. That is outlined in another lecture that we will link to called, I believe that one is called customer discovery research or product market fit research, but it's linked in here, and I'm sure when we get to it, I'll bring it up. The quantitative research is outlined in one of the Dawn of the Data Age lecture series from a few months ago, which was specifically on survey research, and that has a lot more detail. So if you're joining today to just learn how to write questions or what kind of questions and formats and flows and layouts, that additional resource will be really important to you, because we're not going to get into that level of granularity with qualitative or quantitative research. It's more about the milestones in this process and how the process all fits together into a 1-month sprint, which is about 4 times faster than traditional market research would take you through this same qual and quant process. And then I'm going to end on how to utilize this information once you have it, this data. And I've said this before, that data is just information. It's just a efficient way of capturing and expressing information, but it's the information that you need to then go and act on to achieve your product vision. Last lecture was about utilizing the data that you already sit on, that you have within your databases, within your organization, the software tools you use. It's stuff that's immediately available to you. You don't have to go out and create it. That's different from today. Today is focused on if you don't have data, or there's some data you're just never going to get internally, stuff like on your competitors, for example. How do you generate it? How do you go out and get that? I'm going to emphasize again, this is an agile design, which means it is built to be iterative. Product managers are very familiar with agile methodology because it is a staple of most development efforts, and most product managers are integrated with their dev teams. This means that it is something you repeat, not something you do one and done. It implies that this is something that happens quickly. And I will say that I believe traditional market research, as it has been built, taught, and practiced for the last 40, 50 years, is very slow, unnecessarily slow. And I think it's just one of those technological switches that people haven't made a conceptual change or adapted to. So for example, at the University of Utah, where I teach some of these methods in the Utah Community Research Group, we have 4 months. 4 months is about the same time frame as traditional market research projects, if they're not very large scale. If they're very large scale, they can take as much as 8 months, a year, sometimes multiple years. This is not just about that time frame of 4 months. It's about a process that you could go on and do for 4 months, but you would do it in 4 sprints rather than in one big long process. And technology has been what allows this to change. So when I said I'm going to give you this overall picture, the lecture today is focused on a step in a much larger process. And that process at Emperitas, we call that process, it's one of our core principles, but we say that that process can be broken down into really 3 conceptual ideas that are in 4 steps. So the first is thinking broadly. You have to understand how your problem fits into the bigger reality of the situation. So this is your market, this is your competitors, because again, I'm thinking that you are focused on customer research here. This is the trends in the technology that you're utilizing. This is customer preferences and expectations. All of those things are going to affect the kind of information you need to collect. And then you get into the next step, which is mining deeply. And there's other lectures in this series that we have done that talk about data analytics, turning analytics into actionable insight, interpreting data like a pro. And then the third piece of this is explaining simply, turning it into a story that people can understand. The point of this is that the whole thing has to be highly systematized. If you don't have, you're only going to be as good as the system that you're utilizing. And if you don't have a system in place, there's no chance that you're getting through this in 1 month. Everything that follows is built on the necessity of organization. This is not just organization conceptually from things like steps, and then within those steps, stages, and within those stages, milestones, and even within those milestones, tasks. This is also the organization about who's in charge, who's the directly responsible individual for each piece, what are the deadlines, do people know those, are they publicly visible? And then you're producing a lot of information. So you're going to produce information in your secondary research. You're going to get recording files from your expert interviews and customer conversations. You're going to have a draft version of your survey, probably in a Google Doc or a Word doc. You're then going to have your Qualtrics version or your SurveyMonkey version. You're then going to have your raw data file, your analysis ready file, all of your scripts and analytics that you've done, all the reporting. This snowballs into a lot of material very, very quickly. And one of the big mistakes that we see all the time is that individuals who are ready to go and start to conduct research have no system of organizing this ahead of time. And so some of it lives on their computer, some of it lives in the cloud, some of it lives in an email they sent, and anyone else who wants to pick up the ball here and continue on with this research or learn from it is going to have a pretty hard time because it's just not been organized. Everything's broken apart in different places. So those 3 conceptual pieces that I said, thinking broadly, mining deeply, explaining simply, those are core values at Emperitas, but they really fall into 4 steps that I'm going to outline for you here. The first is your roadmap. And we have a separate lecture on getting to quick data wins where this is outlined. This is the link that you can follow in a couple slides. The one here will take you to the storytelling, which outlines this whole process in detail from another presentation that we gave. But SMART goals, setting a goal right at the beginning to ensure that you know what you're going to collect, how you're going to use it, who's responsible, what the dates are. That SMART goal system organizes that information for you so that you have to be prepared, which puts you in the right position to then go execute. And that's where we're focusing today. Everything that follows is just about the execution step, the actual data collection, qualitative data, secondary data, quantitative primary data. The third step in this process is the analysis, and then the fourth is reporting. And so if you look at this, you can conceptually say that the roadmap and the execution are really the thinking broadly portion. The analysis is the mining deep. The reporting is explaining simply. But we are going to now go deeply into the execution step. This step itself can be divided into 2 stages that have their own milestones, and milestones should be something that group tasks. Not utilizing milestones creates an environment where all the tasks seem very disconnected. It's hard to understand how they're supposed to fit together, what kind of momentum you're supposed to get from them. So it's important to utilize that in-between piece, which is the milestones. And in the case of the execution step for Agile customer research, it's two pieces: qualitative research and quantitative research. And the difference here is there's lots of trade-offs, pros and cons to each, but really the big issue here is that with qualitative research, it can be done fast, usually cheaply. You can get pretty good information very, very quickly, but it's not going to have the statistical significance of a large quantitative data set. And for large decisions where you want to make sure that your estimations are precise, you need to then go into that second milestone, which is the quantitative research. There is an Agile system that only utilizes qualitative research. You could do that every month, over and over and over. 10, 20, 30 customer conversations and never go into an actual survey. But we have found that blending these two together creates the best outcome. Now, within the qualitative research stage, within the execution step, there are three main milestones: secondary research, expert interviews, and customer conversations. And these are going to be each individually talked about here in some of the upcoming slides. And that's true as well of the quantitative research stage. You have programming the survey, pre-testing and soft launching, and then data collection. Now again, within each of these milestones, which are these bullets here, you have tasks. So with secondary research, there are a lot fewer tasks than there are with customer conversations. With customer conversations, you have to identify customers, you have to vet them, you have to solicit them, you have to schedule the interview, you have to conduct the interview, you have to send them the incentive. All of those tasks are related to that conversation, which is why it is a milestone within the stage of qualitative research. Visually, it's 6 steps for these two, 6 milestones, for these 2 stages in this step of execution. The size of these circles indicates the overall intensity, both in time and effort. So secondary research is something you can usually do in a day or two. And once you get organized and you have a few people helping you, it can take hours. It does not have to take days and days and days to do this. Expert interviews are a little bit harder. You have to actually find experts, schedule with them, but they're smaller scale. You do a lower number of them overall. And so for that reason, customer conversations within the qualitative stage are by far the majority of the time that you will spend. And really the first 2 pieces, the secondary research and the expert interviews, those milestones are building towards the customer conversation. This is also true with the quantitative stage. Programming the survey, if you've done secondary research and conducted expert interviews and talked to customers, should not take you more than a day or two to write the questions, create the layout, and then go program it into a software tool like Qualtrics. Now, pre-testing and soft launching, that takes more effort, takes more time. You have to actually sit and wait while data comes in, depending on what kind of a sample you're using, both with your internal pre-test, getting people on your team to make sure that everything is okay, and then soft launch to your actual customers. That can take a little bit more time, a few days. And the effort is ongoing. You have to be monitoring the survey, making any updates as you find problems. It's a little bit more effort, but it's a small amount of effort relative to full data collection. And a lot of people skip this step. They just go straight from programming a survey. A lot of people don't even do the qualitative phase. They just write a survey and launch it. They just fully launch it and they get back their data. And then they look at their data and they say, oh, this question is not producing the kind of information we thought it was going to. Or people skipped this question completely. How are they able to even do that? Nobody answered this question. The data column is completely empty. What went wrong with the survey? And you discover those things after the fact, and those are expensive lessons to learn. Because if you're doing a large-scale quantitative survey and you're going to use a panel company to find customers outside of your organization, so you don't have their email, you don't know who they are, but you want to talk to them, or maybe you want to get an overall market assessment, so you're going to look at the general population, that can cost tens of thousands of dollars just to get in touch with those people. So as a result, it is an expensive lesson to learn. And I have said it in other lectures, and I'll say it again: pre-test, pre-test, pre-test. No matter how much you think you've vetted your own survey, you'll be amazed when you soft launch the problems people find. And then you can fix them, and then you can launch. And even during the full launch, you're going to still find some other problems. And it's one of the advantages of a digital survey, that you can update those as you go. But each of these 2 stages in the Gantt that I'm going to show you here shortly that lays out this overall Agile customer research process, this is 1 week for each of these things. Now the data collection can spill over a few more days. into the analysis. There's analytical stuff you can start to prep for while data collection is happening. But really, half of your sprint should be this, the actual field work, going out and getting information. The other two parts of the sprints are going to be the analysis and the reporting. So within organizational behavior, there is a famous saying, and I don't know if Craig Freshley is the one who coined it. I just found a YouTube video of his where he says it, and so I wanted to cite to him, but this is something I've heard many times in other places, that if something is everyone's job, it's no one's job. And I think Craig does a good job of outlining why this is the case. In fact, there's really strong economic foundations to what he's saying about why this would happen, but when responsibilities spread over multiple people, it's very easy for people to shirk, to not do it. And if there is any sort of punishment for it, which is also harder because there's multiple people involved, there's any sort of sanction after the fact because it wasn't done, those individuals feel a portion of it. They don't feel the whole thing. And that just doesn't lead to good outcomes. People need to be held to clear standards that are fair standards, but they have to understand what those are and what's expected. And this is why you need, for every piece that's in this, every milestone, every task needs to be assigned to a directly responsible individual. It's in the SMART goals. It will ask you who's going to be the DRI for this specific hypothesis that we're testing. It also includes deadlines. What is the deadline by which we need this? And if you have that information, if you now know within the overall steps, right, thinking broadly, mining deeply, explaining simply, within that, if you know that you are in the road mapping step or the execution step, or then within that execution step, you are at the qualitative stage, and within that qualitative stage, you are at the expert interview milestone, and for the expert interview milestone, Adam is always in charge. And anything related to that is going to be something that Adam has to maintain. So all the tasks related to it, they're Adam's domain. He could assign one to Tom, but then Tom becomes the directly responsible individual on that task, which is part of a milestone that Adam is still the directly responsible individual for. With that level of detail and all of the deadlines, you can then create a visual, a Gantt chart. So this is something that's also very familiar to product managers, maybe not so much to other people if you're not in that field, if you're not a dev. But the Gantt chart shows, so vertically here, if you look to the left, you have milestones and tasks. They're color-coded to match the earlier visualization with those 4 pieces. And what you can see is that a milestone like secondary research really only has 1 task outlined for here. Some of the others, like conducting expert interviews, may have 4 tasks. To the right, as you move out, you will see red blocks. That shows the day that task is due and should be, or is being done, and then the last day that it's red is the one that it's due. So for example, if you look at scheduling and conducting the expert interviews, it's going to happen over 2 days, but it's due by day 3. This is a 4 business week sprint. So you have 20 days total. If you follow this link down here, in fact, I'll just click it, it'll jump out, and then we'll jump back. This is visible for you. You can go look at it online as an example. We'll leave it up there for you. But you can see and interact with as it loads. You will see all the milestones and tasks, the stages they can change, and then you can scroll over to the right and see how the Gantt is laying out each of these pieces over time. Now, the analysis and the reporting steps we're not covering today. We're going to briefly mention them at the very end. There's separate lectures on that, but notice that they are part of this process, this 1-month process, and they represent half of the time. And they're also a little bit more fluid. You're going to go back and forth between these, unlike the earlier steps that are going to be very sequential. Okay? So you can go look at this. This is not the word of the marketing research gods. This is our approach. It works very well for us. Maybe a 2-week sprint is all you need. Maybe you want to give yourself 4 days instead of 3 days for some of these parts. The point is that with milestones and tasks, DRIs and dates, you can create this visual that everyone sees and everyone knows what's going on. And I mentioned earlier, it's not enough to just have a plan for executing this. You have to have a plan for what you're going to do with all the information that you produce as a result of your research. Most people do not think about this step. At a minimum, just create one folder and drop everything in there and then go back and organize it. But I would encourage you ahead of time, you know you're going to be conducting secondary research. Where are those sources going to live? You know you're going to be conducting expert interviews. What questions are you going to ask? Where is that document so that if you got sick that day and someone else had to do the expert interview for you, it's not lost. You can still do it. What about the recordings of those interviews? You have to have some sort of system, and it gets out of control if you just start dropping everything in one folder, but that's still better than nothing. I encourage you to look into the use of foldering and subfoldering. You can do that by the steps, by the stages, by the milestones, by the tasks. You need a lexicon of critical terms. I'm trying to utilize those right now when I talk about the steps versus the stages versus the milestones versus the tasks. That way, if I tell Adam that he's the DRI over this task, he immediately knows that that task is a subcomponent of a milestone that is a subcomponent of a stage, which is a subcomponent of a step. File naming convention is also really important. This should be related to the project. It should have some sort of date component. And there's all kinds of resources online about best practices for doing this. There's whole software tools whose only purpose is to help you do document control. If you have one, utilize it. Because this information is going to aggregate. And it's the sum total of all the information that you'll need at the end of this research when you start to try to tell the story with the data. And then the last part is access management. Who gets to access what parts of this and why? So we use this at Emperitas. I also use this at the Utah CRG at the University of Utah. In fact, that's where I developed this because I was dealing with students often who would conduct research and not be able to explain an output, a visual that they produced. They didn't know where the data file was. They couldn't find a recording of an interview. And we set this standard that if you cannot in 30 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it's actually a lot of time when you're searching digital files. If you can't find something in 30 seconds and reference it, it's not organized. So this could be you've got 1 second to open your one main folder and 29 seconds to scroll frantically through it. More than likely, if you've done the right kind of naming and file structuring, you will immediately be able to go right to where it should be and pull it right up. This becomes even more important when you start to do the analytics. And I'll show you what we call the treasure map, which outlines all the things that are going to be done analytically and then links to other folders where all the analytical output exists. But the 30-second rule is a good guide. So that's a 30,000-foot overview of the bigger system. But most of the work is going to be in conducting these qualitative and quantitative interviews. Half of the sprint is going out and actually getting information. The analytics will take a week, but that's not as intense of a process because you're not relying on other people to do it, like you are with interviews and surveys. And then with reporting, it's a creative process. It's not as in a work production cycle kind of process like this. So let's go through each of these milestones in detail. So the first is secondary research. And people are usually pretty good at doing this. Students have been conditioned through the education system. When you write a research paper, you go out, you find some sources, you do a lit review. And there's an element of that to this, but really what I'm talking about with secondary research is you are scouring all publicly available knowledge that relates to your research. And this can be, you should bucket this stuff ahead of time. You should know ahead of time what you're looking for. Don't just go wandering. But market trends, understanding your place in the bigger market is really, really important. That includes competitors. And then when assessing both yourself and competitors, there's 4 other buckets that you can use, which are what are the pieces of information that relate to the product itself? What are the pieces of information that relate to pricing? What are the pieces of information that relate to messaging? What are the pieces of information that relate to the channel mix? And let me explain what I mean by each of those in detail here. So with the product, this could be logging onto a competitor's website and looking at how they've bundled, looking at what features are within which tier of their product, what products they're offering overall. Could be SKUs, could be services. Doesn't have to be a physical product or a digital product. How many variations of that do they offer? Then what about pricing? This is stuff that's publicly available. Sometimes you can find, even if a company doesn't publish its own pricing, you can often find review sites where people will talk about the price that they paid. If they're a publicly traded company, you can often find this information buried within their quarterly investor calls, or any of their other publicly mandated pieces of information that they provide based from the government. Can you figure out what other people are charging? And this gives you a sense of the willingness to pay. So if you're going to, for example, figure out if you can increase your price, maybe you're at $10 and you want to figure out if you can increase it to $15. Going out and understanding the other prices that a customer would face when making a decision between you and a competitor will give you a range over which it's reasonable. So if you find that all of your pricing of your competitors is grouped in the $5 to $7 range, you're now moving from being $3 more expensive to being twice as expensive. That's a big, big change. So maybe that's too much. You can then go do some quantitative surveys. Discrete choice modeling would tell you whether you can actually pull that off or not, but you need some pricing information to understand willingness to pay. And this is important because willingness to pay is not the same thing as what they actually pay. So the price that you get when you do an economic exchange is the price that someone is actually paying. Willingness to pay could be higher. It's usually higher. So they might be actually paying $5, but they're deriving $10 of value from it. And so if you were to increase your price to $8, they're still going to get $2 additional of value. They're willing to pay more. A third piece, like I said, the messaging. This comes down to their marketing. Use sites like SpyFu, Moat. There are great digital marketing tools that let you immediately get a snapshot of everything that your competitors are doing. Some of this was outlined by our guest 2 lectures ago, Trevor from Alliance Health, when he came and spoke about the tools that they use. That's in the data-driven content creation lecture. He outlines in detail the free tools, the paid tools. They will show you the messaging, the colors, the actual text, the imagery, the calls to action. All of that information is just out there floating around. Follow your competitors on social. Pay attention to what they're putting on billboards. Look for any traditional media that they're placing. You can start to figure out what they're saying about their product. You can then compare that to what you're saying about your product. And then the channel mix is, well, how much of it is billboard versus banner ads online versus social posts versus organic search? What's the mix that they're using with that messaging at their pricing to sell their product? Because that's informing your customer's decision as well. And then once you have an assessment of your main competitors and your own position, that's when you can start to understand those broader market trends. Another piece is the customer chatter itself. It's amazing how much you can get just from review sites and social media. Some social media have open APIs. Twitter, for example, you can be, by the end of today, scraping data from Twitter through their API. It takes no time at all. There are other tools that already exist, things like Nuvi, Mention, that will do it for you based on hashtags or keywords. But you can get all that information about what's being said, who's saying it, who they're saying it to, through social media. And then another place that people don't often look for secondary research is other product managers have conducted customer research. Some of them have probably even used Agile methods. Usually you can find PowerPoints and PDFs. It's amazing how much public information there is. Sometimes people put it on a drive and don't even realize that it's public. You can find whole other research studies. Sometimes there are organizations that just sell these. So VentureBeats is a good example. Sometimes they'll just go run a survey themselves, try to understand something, and they'll put together a report and they'll sell it for $300. Sometimes you can find academic publications about research that's been done on willingness to pay with SaaS product users. But that can help inform your whole process, not just the information that you need about your place in the market, giving you and your competitors product, price, messaging, channel mix. Now, secondary research is called that because you're passive in its consumption. You don't create it, you don't generate it. It's there, and so you can learn from it, but it's a passive consumption. That changes with expert interviews. Expert interviews start to enter the realm of primary research. You're now going to go out, secondary and primary being the key terms there, you're going to go out and create something yourself. Now, this should be a stepping stone. This should not be the only thing you do, and it has a very specific purpose. Accelerating your knowledge about basically what you don't know. There are people who are just incredible experts. They can, off the top of their head, recite everything about a market, competitors, all that information that you were looking for in secondary research that's probably already in their head. And so what you can do is piggyback on their knowledge. Sometimes you have to pay a consulting fee. Sometimes they'll just do it if they see that you have a legitimate purpose and that you're doing it well. You're conducting your research well. But these should be short interviews, 30 minutes at the most. They should be narrowly focused on their niche. These experts are not going to be an expert at your entire problem. They're going to be an expert in a component about it. Maybe it's the technology stack that your product is built on, or the technology stack your competitor is using. Well, what are the past trends and future trends of that technology? That expert might be able to tell you that. The other thing that they can help you do is sort through all your secondary research. So because you've done secondary research, you can come to these expert interviews with a focus that you wouldn't have otherwise. And you can present to them, hey, I've discovered this, I've discovered that. They'll immediately tell you what does or does not matter. Record these if you can. That becomes one of the files you have to organize. You will not remember everything from these conversations. You need to ask permission. In fact, in some states, there's rules about one party can record the other without permission. But just ask. We have never been told no. Anytime we've asked, hey, we'd like to record this, and here's the purpose why, so that we can listen to it afterwards and we don't have to type everything that you're saying while we're going, they're usually fine with it. It's a good rehearsal as well for the next step. And remember the size of these circles from that earlier visualization. Most of the work in the qualitative week is going to be spent on this, customer conversations. We have found that one person can really conduct at most five to seven of these in a day. And that person is a machine that works for us. Her name is Lindsay, and I don't think most people on planet Earth can do that many. So that's kind of the high water mark. 2 to 3 a day is very reasonable. These should be about 30 minutes, 45 minutes tops. You will need to incentivize people to participate. Sometimes they don't want the incentive after they participate, but they need to see, again, just like the experts, that you have a legitimate purpose, that you're well organized, that you're willing to reward them for their time. Now, this is a conversation, it's not a survey yet. And there's a temptation because you actually create a document called a script, and this is another one of the examples. I'll click this, it'll jump out. You can go look at this one. We use Google Forms for this, even though we're a Qualtrics partner and we love Qualtrics, and I'll show you a Qualtrics survey that's related to this same research. We use Google Forms for this because it's just cleaner and easier, and frankly, it's free. They don't ever see this. The customer doesn't see this. Most of these interviews are done by phone, but even if they're not, you can use this on your machine. This is just a systematized way of getting information, knowing what information you want to get out of the conversation. It's not going to go in this order. They'll start to talk about what is question 5. You'll get that, maybe question 6, and then they'll jump to something like the metrics that they're using. Or all of this example, these worked examples that I'm providing are from product manager research we have been doing. It's been the feature of the last lecture and some of this lecture. It's also been the last 2 LinkedIn Pulse articles summarize a lot of this research. And there will be a white paper that comes out in about a month that summarizes all of this research. But if you went and looked at that secondary research tracking sheet, it's again about product managers, and that information led to the creation of this script, which is being used to guide the conversation. Do not type constantly throughout this. The goal is not to fill this out in real time. The goal is to use this as a guide, to record it again, and then to afterwards come back and fully fill this out. Another reason we like to use this is because the data will end up in a spreadsheet that's really nice and clean within Google. A $50 incentive seems to be the minimum now. If you try $5, $10, $25, it just doesn't seem to get people's attention anymore. And this is not a survey. You really need people's attention. The whole point of this is so that you can probe, you can go off script, you can discover the things that you don't know. You've utilized what you've learned from the secondary research, you've utilized the conversations with experts. You're going to hear now from the actual customers, and you're going to discover new things you weren't thinking of. Don't be afraid to go off script and probe. All of this information, once you're done, is going to be used to create the survey. So you don't have to do a lot of these. Maybe 10, 20 in any sprint is sufficient. Pay attention for anything that starts to show up in 5 or more interviews. If you keep hearing the same thing from 5 customers, that is something you need to dig deep on in the survey. So this is the lecture that I mentioned earlier. I couldn't remember the title. If you go there, there is a whole section on customer conversations. There's also a case study of how this was done, how we found customers for a startup called Spera. They're a fintech platform. How we found freelancers using Twitter, scraping people, finding influencers, conducting these interviews, soliciting and then conducting these interviews, and then summarizing all of that information. So you can go learn about customer conversations in detail from that video link. But the majority of the work in the quantitative phase is going to be programming, testing, and launching the survey. You're going to take all the information from that qualitative phase, stage, I'm going to keep using the right terms, qualitative stage, and from each of those milestones, so the secondary research that you've done, the expert interviews you've conducted, the customer conversations that you've had, you're going to roll that information up into a formalized quantitative survey, and I highly encourage you to build it first in some sort of document. We like to use Google Docs because multiple people can be working on it at the same time. Microsoft obviously has that feature now. There's plenty of interactive tools that allow you to do this. I discourage you from using a Word doc that you keep sending around and using track changes, because we just find that it slows stuff down. We're back to the efficiency. You can do that, it's just going to cost you time. And the reason that you build it in a doc first is because once you get into the survey tool like Qualtrics, you have to know exactly what you want to build. And it's not as easy to get everyone's feedback on stuff in Qualtrics as it is with something like a Google Doc. But let me launch this and show you. This is the preview link to the quantitative survey. This is what the white paper data will show. You can see the mobile version on the right. You can see the desktop version on the left. You can play with this all you want. It doesn't count towards any of our responses. You're not going to break it. You can't hurt it. The nice thing about Qualtrics is that this preview option allows you to set bookmarks. So if you know that there's a place where there's skip logic, you can set a bookmark. You can test the different yes, nos. You can even skip something that has to be validated if you want to. That will also mean that skip logic doesn't work or display logic doesn't work. But you can experience the customer's survey experience, their user experience yourself, by walking through it, both on mobile and on desktop. Survey flow is very important. Survey length is very important. All of these things are outlined in that Stepping Up Your Survey Research link down here on the left. With this, there's a whole video just dedicated to this stuff. But the general rule of thumb is a customer could complete 3 questions in a minute unless that question is an open-ended form that says, tell me about your job, or do you have any other things that you want to let us know? If that's the case, it takes about a minute for them to complete that question by itself. So if you have 30 questions and they're all multiple choice, select all that apply, scaled, fill in little form entry, not long questions, then it's going to be about a 10-minute survey. Now you can easily get someone to take a 20, 30-minute survey. The longest survey that we've ever fielded, and it's some of the example data from earlier lectures, was for a festival, a Shakespearean festival. That survey was 90 questions long and took about 24 minutes on average, which means there were people who spent 30, 45 minutes, but they had an amazing incentive. I mean, a very big incentive. So a good survey incentive can offset a long survey. Solicitation channels will also greatly affect how many completed responses you get. If you have a customer list and you're going to email them and they already know you, you're going to get a higher response rate than if you just email from a list that you purchase. Or if you find people on social and you direct message them. Those things have different response rates that you should track and monitor, and stepping up your survey research outlines the best practices to optimize those and make sure that you get more responses and more completed responses. Now, Qualtrics is probably the greatest survey tool. Maybe I don't know of one that's even better, but so far everything that we've looked at, Qualtrics is the leader when it comes to survey design, and it's for this reason. You can personalize the survey experience. You can build surveys within surveys within surveys. So if you know that someone is a certain type of customer, they can be funneled into a little mini survey that no one else sees those questions. Only they do because you qualified them, which means that you might have a 60 or 70 question survey, but really at most one person would only ever see 40 questions, and some people might only see 10 and other people might only see 20. There might be some overlap between those. Maybe 20%, 30% of the questions will be the same for everybody. This is probably true with things like demographics at the end or maybe some qualifiers. But a non-customer or a non-user in your case, or a competitor's customer, or nobody's customer who's just interested, you're going to have to ask them different questions. You don't have to create different surveys for that. In fact, I would encourage you not to. What you should do is be thinking ahead of time, who are the people that we want to reach, these customers, what experience would they need, and then you custom build that. There's nothing out there that lets you do that like Qualtrics. And this doesn't just produce more data, because you will get more completed surveys this way. It produces far better data. You have precision that you're not going to get by asking every single person the same question. I said earlier, pretest, pretest, pretest. Okay, the difference between a pretest and a soft launch at this milestone is that the pretest is done internally. This is you and your team vetting the survey that you've programmed. Then you send it out to customers. At that point, it's a soft launch. Do not send it to everybody. Do not blast an untested survey to everyone. There are so many horror stories that you can read online about surveys that have gone wrong and things that haven't worked. And this used to be a bigger problem. When you had to mail things instead of doing it digitally, or you had to go do it in person, it can cause really big problems to not have a fully tested survey. The difference here between the pretest and the soft launch is that with the pretest, you're not your customer. With the soft launch, it is the customer. These are really 20 to 30 people that you wanted to talk to. You give them the survey, you monitor their responses, you can even ask them afterwards, were there any problems with the survey, did questions not make sense? They will give you that feedback, you will be able to make those updates, and then you'll be prepared to do a full launch. Sometimes you do multiple soft launches. We had one recently. In fact, it was for the product managers with the survey that I just showed you through Qualtrics, where the filtering criteria initially was not getting what we wanted. So we were looking at the data on the back end, and one of the first questions on that survey is, are you a product manager? Yes, no. People were misunderstanding that. We had someone who said that they were an artisan cheese seller and they managed their business. They misinterpreted what a product manager was. So once we changed that question type to say different job titles, of which some were product managers, then we were able to carry them through and clean up the quality of the responses we were getting. We had to do 3 soft launches before we felt confident pushing this to the full panel and getting all the responses. But with tools like Qualtrics, you can monitor that data in real time as it comes in. You can make those changes in real time, and the same link, the same solicitation works just fine. After the soft launch, you've entered a new milestone, which is data collection. You are in the field. This was the old term, fieldwork, because you used to have to go intercept people at a mall. You used to have to go knock on doors and canvass neighborhoods. You used to have to go do direct mailing, stuff envelopes, follow up on them. Data collection can take other forms. So in the last lecture, we talked about observational data. This milestone in a observational study, so one that would utilize maybe like your events data within your product that you already have, that data collection would not necessitate talking to customers. Instead, it would be internal. You're going to be going to different stakeholders and decision makers in your organization to get access to data that you don't currently have. it's still data collection. But this is really focused on the survey right now. If you have, oh, we have a question here. Go ahead, Tom.
So, do you do reminders? I mean, I know you send out an email.
Yes.
And you get like
Yeah.
1 or 2 days of responses, and then and then it really drops off.
That's a
and
very
then a reminder, and some more, and drops off.
Yeah, and those drop-offs are very predictable. And I believe that this is covered in the survey research, Step Up Your Survey Research lecture. But we typically will not send more than 3 reminders. So you send an initial solicitation, you send a reminder, and if you've uploaded the list into, like, you've got your customer list here, and you upload it into Qualtrics, then every person on the list gets an individual link, rather than you just blasting everyone with one link.
Right.
And one of the advantages of that is that you can see who has or has not completed the survey.
Right.
And if you do set a reminder, anyone who's completed it will not get hit up for that again, which makes people very upset, by the way. Because the first thing that they think is that it didn't work. And then they're upset that they wasted their time. And then they go and they do the survey again. And so if you, this isn't a case where you just send
where
one
they
link.
know other people doing the survey.
No, this is a case where you just send a reminder to everybody, including the people who've completed
it.
They get very upset. Right? They send you
but
back emails.
Qualtrics,
I already with Qualtrics, it's no problem. If you just get a link from SurveyMonkey, you're using your own internal email tool and you're sending it out without validating who's completed it, then someone who completed it gets the invitation again. And they might even go take the survey again. And then you send a third reminder. And at this point, this is when people get really upset. They're like, I've done the survey twice. Why are you still hassling me about this? The Qualtrics tool, the contacts tool, ensures that that does not happen. But we will still only do 3 total messages. And they are slightly different. They may have different calls to action in the subject line. They will have different text, often pointing out, in the first one, we want your opinion. In the second one, we still want your opinion. And in the third one, this is your last chance to give us your opinion. And if you don't get somebody the first time, the chances that you get them the second time go down a lot. It's about 10 to 15% will go complete it on a follow-up. And that's usually people who've already started it, who just get a reminder that they haven't finished it, and then they finish it. A third reminder, it drops down to 2-3%, and then after that, there's no point in continuing to hassle them. And we do those usually over the course of a couple of days. So we'll do the first one, and then 2 days later we'll send another one, and then maybe the next day we'll send another one. And in those, we're telling them, you only have until this point to give us your feedback. Because if they're working, they're just like the people in your organization. If they're working against unknown expectations, unknown deadlines, with unclear calls to action, you're not going to get good response rates. So if you go to that survey lecture, Step Up Your Survey Research lecture, I think it's about 2/3 of the way through, that conversation comes up. I believe you may have even been the person who asked that previously. So for those who are joining us that don't know, there are some people who are here with us in person at these lectures, and then there are those who join remotely. If you're in Utah and you're in Salt Lake and you want to come by for any of these, feel free. I already talked about monitoring the survey, but there's 3 things you should really be looking at. Read open-ended responses. We always include a question at the end of the survey, and if you go look at that Qualtrics link that I provided, the preview, you will see that the last question on the survey, and it's always that way, is, do you have anything else you want to tell us? That's where people will put in information about, hey, a question didn't work for me, or I wanted to answer it this way and it wouldn't let me, or hey, I saw the same question 2 times in a row, I don't know why. You'll find errors to the survey in those open-ended responses. Now, those can also be other please specify fields on a question. So you may have 6 choices, and then the 6th one might be other please specify. If that question's not making sense to someone, they will often select other and then put in that field, I wanted to say this and it wasn't there. This question's not working. I wanted to go back and I couldn't. The other thing you should be monitoring is, does the data look the way it should? Download the data set. This is something you do during the soft launch as well. Download the data set. Make sure your coding is working the way you want. Make sure you're getting the responses that you want. This is how we found that artisan cheese seller. They described their job. But we're looking at the actual data, not just some summary report. And then the other thing is time to completion and question drop. So within Qualtrics, and they've since buried this a little, but it's still there, you have to kind of poor user experience. So if there are any product managers from Qualtrics listening, please know that I do not like that you have to now click 4 times within the reporting tab to eventually get to the survey statistics, the full suite of survey statistics. And they show start times, start dates, length to completion, question drop off. So maybe everybody gets 60% of the way through the survey and they keep dropping off on one question. Why? It could be that there's a problem with that question. It could be the wording's wrong. It could be there's a programming issue. But if you see that kind of drop off, you can then go and fix it. Those 6 milestones in those 2 stages within the execution step of this process have been outlined in greater detail in a LinkedIn Pulse article that we published last week. So if you follow this link, it will take you there. That's where information about the question types and the lengths and the solicitation channels and the roles of incentives. It gets into more detail because it's written. It doesn't talk much about analytics at all. But it really does talk about the qualitative and quantitative best practices in more detail than I can give you today because, again, this is about the overall process. But these 6 milestones should take you about 2 weeks. At that point, you're moving into a new step. You've moved from execution, and now you're moving into analysis. You have to extract the insights from this and then put it into a story that everybody can, the last step in that process, explaining it simply. You have to then put it into a report that's going to answer the original hypotheses that you had from your SMART goals. And so you need to pause at this moment. You're going to be super excited that you've got your data in hand, maybe thousands of responses. And you're going to want to dig in and find every single thing of every little insight that's in there that you possibly can. And it's a mistake, and it will result in you chasing phantom things that don't result in anything. It takes a lot of your time, and it will take you off of this Agile sprint cycle. At this moment, you need to pause. You need to go back to your SMART goals, which this lecture assumes you've already done. You can go learn how to do SMART goals at that link that's there in the bottom left. But the reason for revisiting your SMART goals at this point is that you had in there very specific hypotheses, things that you said you were going to answer. You also had in there what you said you would do with those answers. Those 2 things should frame how you approach the analysis. You should only do analysis that is going to answer one of those hypotheses. And you should do that analysis in a way that directly allows someone to act on it in a way that they said they were going to. So for example, if one of the things is, we think we could increase our price, and you do secondary research, that's one of your hypotheses from the SMART goals, and you do secondary research and you find that you're pretty well positioned from a pricing standpoint relative to competitors. You talk to experts and they tell you that yes, customers are willing to pay way more than the market is asking them to right now because there's a lot of competition and so there's a lot of pressure on price, but customers are really looking for a high-end solution and would be willing to pay more if one existed. And then you discover that you have that high-end solution. And then you do a discrete choice model survey and you figure out your exact pricing that you could optimize around. You find out the pricing sensitivities, you find an inelastic region in the pricing, in the demand curves, and you say, okay, we're going to increase the price. If that wasn't the actual step that someone said they were going to take from that SMART goal, so if that hypothesis didn't say, based on this information, we will actually increase price, then all of that effort was for nothing. Because you'll come to them, the rest of your team will say, we can increase price, and they're going, we're not going to do that. And all of that time and all that effort and all of that analytics that you've done will be for nothing. So make sure that you're always focused on answering one of these hypotheses. And this is why you pause and go back to your SMART goals at this point. The other thing is that you need a map. We call it the analytics treasure map. This is our jargon internally. And that's because this is a new step, right? You're mining deeply. And mining implies that there's value to be found in the data. And this is a common phrase within data science where they talk about nuggets, or they talk about gems, or they talk about, it's always in literal mining terms, right? You got to pick a mountainside and figure out where you're going to start to dig, and then you have to dig down to find a vein, and then you have to follow that vein. It's the exact same process when you're hunting through a mountain of data. And if you don't have a map that shows you the steps that you're going to need to take to answer, then you're just going to get lost. Like I said, you'll go down rabbit holes that just don't matter. You'll be excited about them too. People love to find little insights, but they don't answer a key hypothesis, and there's no action that's going to be taken on them. And so here's another link to another document. This is based on the same survey for product managers, the same document, core of documents that I've shown you so far. You'll see that the survey questions are over here. This is a description of what the survey question asks. These 4 pieces come from the Interpreting Data Like a Pro lecture that outlined, and there have been other lectures where we've talked about this. These are the 4 different ways to define data. In fact, it's in the last lecture for product managers about data-driven product vision. You need to know the origin, scope, totality, and measurement of the data types. Then what kind of descriptives? So you're going to do some exploratory data analysis, then you're going to go into descriptives, what visuals to create, what tests of relationship or difference you're going to do, and then this is where it would link to folders that have the actual output. We use R, and so you'd have all your R output, tables, charts, right, measures of shape, center, and spread from the Interpreting Data as a Pro lecture. All of that would be immediately available, and we know exactly what we're going to do before we go in to do it. That doesn't mean that you won't do some free-form analysis, but you have to have this plan in your hands before you start, or it is just a wild treasure hunt. And really, just keep going back to your hypotheses from the SMART goals. What are the questions you have to answer? The final step in the Agile customer research process, if you go back all the way to the first visual that we showed, this would be the far right green step, is to now explain simply. You have to story tell with data. If you just put up a bunch of charts and visuals and there's no context for it or what it connects to or why it matters, you're not going to affect any change. And this is where it's really heartbreaking, because if you've gotten to this point, if you've actually been able to do your SMART goals, conduct the qualitative stage of research, conduct the quantitative stage of research, including all the milestones, you've done all the analysis correctly, you've answered those original hypotheses, and then you can't explain it to somebody who needs to act on it, they won't act on it. So again, all your effort will have been for nothing. This is the one that just breaks my heart, because there's a lot of things that can cause research programs to go wrong, but once you have the information, just not explaining it appropriately seems like heartbreaking. The key is that you do have to have a story, and you have to have a lot of visuals. People are visual learners. That's another one of the visualizing data lecture that we did, where we talked about people process visual information tens of thousands of times faster than anything they verbally hear or read. So at this point, and we're about to end, at this point you've gone through all the stages in the Agile market research process in 1 month. You should have been able to spend, you already had your SMART goals, you then conducted the qualitative stage, you then conducted the quantitative stage, you then did the analysis, you then built a great report that's got lots of visuals and tells a really compelling story based on the information. People have to go act, and this is why it's an Agile system. You need that feedback of what happens. So if they do go and change price, did it increase revenue? Did it increase profit? Did it attract maybe a whole different class, a different persona of customers? You need to be able to validate that, but action has to be taken for you to assess it. And this is why I said this system is 4 times faster than traditional market research. That doesn't mean that you're not going to spend 4 months doing it. It just means that you can get to the first group of information within a month, and then that information can get put into the wild. Your team can go act on it for a month. You can conduct some other research study in that month, and then you can come back to this original research at month number 3, and you can run the research again and see if there's been a noticeable change. You need to validate. That's the whole Agile process, right? Develop, execute, validate. It's an iterative system. not a one-and-done system. And at the core of this is the SMART goals, but at the end of it is how did you, and that's one of the SMART goals that it will ask is what is a success? How did you define a success, a measurable success? You will have that to go back to months later and say, okay, we said we wanted to learn about this, we would do this with it, and this will be defined as a success. Has that happened? Yes, no. With that kind of precision, you will be able to guide your product vision in a very, very powerful way using both the observational data we covered last time and all of the research data that we covered this time. So with that, we're going to go to questions. But at this point, I'll take anything about if you want to know anything about the overall research design, any details about the qualitative or quantitative milestones and their best practices, or how you can utilize this system to then achieve your product vision. Going once, going twice. All right, next month, not even next month, it's in 2 weeks, because today is March. Data drive better sales conversion. So where we've been focusing on product managers for the last 2 of these lectures, for the next 2 we're going to focus really on sales teams. Their problems are very different when it comes to data, both observational data, things that exist, say, in their CRM, and a lot of that comes down to problems with data imputation. And then there will also be another lecture after this one that focuses on how to use research, customer research for sales.